The Shy Hero and the Assassin Princesses is a pretty funny anime that just started airing. I'm not usually a fan of harem type animes, but this one I think is done in a pretty clever way that makes it at least interesting and fun. The Shy Hero is named Toto, and he's just really desperate to get any kind of party because he's so socially awkward that he can't even function enough to have a conversation, despite the fact that he's inexplicably strong in this fantasy world. So he's desperate to become more socially functional, and he envisions himself saying really cool things that you would see in kind of any anime from a hero. The whole "don't worry, I'll protect you," blah 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 type thing. And three girls at the same time would benefit from assassinating him. The one on the left, the little lowly, which I also hate, is Ciel, or Ciel, and she's the Demon King's daughter. And this is kind of her coming of age process, is to assassinate a hero that could threaten the Demon King. Anemone is the chick on screen now. She's an assassin, and her magic ability lets her pull out guns and snipers and shit. And she's getting a huge payday if she kills him dressed up as a priestess. And either Gore or Goa, depending on which translation you look at. And she's this dominatrix who specializes in potions and perfumes, chemistry type stuff to manipulate people. Obviously, you can see she's kind of the fan service character. And her goal is to turn him into a pet, because that's her fetish, is to turn someone really strong into her dominated submissive. Here's a nice image of him envisioning himself saying cool shit in his head. And overall, I find the whole premise amusing. I would say the girls are actually the main character, because they're really the ones who you see develop and change as the story goes on. The hero, Toto, spends a lot of time knocked out, which I would say is kind of an annoying thing, and that the gag is a bit repetitive. He does get better as it goes on, but you can see a lot of the times they talk to him or give him a hug and he just passes out immediately. The way that it works is that the girls are fighting over who's going to kill him first, and they actually end up failing and kind of fighting with each other. You can see Ciel summoned a big monster that ran out of her control, and obviously Toto steps in and saves the day. So at first they actually kind of can't figure out what the best way to kill him is, and they have a little bit of guilt because he saved their lives from this giant monster. And as the story goes on, those three take turns on whose day it will be to try to assassinate him. And obviously, as you can imagine, they do kind of find some weaknesses throughout the story, but they sort of grow closer to each other and him to the point where they don't really want to do it, and the attempts start to become more half-hearted. Obviously, they eventually contemplate whether or not to tell him the truth about why they partied up with him to begin with, and they go on an adventure, and they try to rank up their party level so they can take on bigger challenges under the guise of it making him more tired or subjected to more monsters, so they might be able to assassinate him, all the while obviously becoming friends, kind of actually developing feelings for him, and the general shenanigans you see in an anime fantasy show that's not too serious. And it's fun because the characters are actually fairly well thought out and articulated. Anemone became an assassin because she hates slavers, she was poor growing up, and she needs money to help people. So you see her kill slavers when she sees them around. She generally tries to use her money for good purposes. There's a point in the story way later on where they all get put into like a hypnosis type state, and you can see her fantasy is to have like an orphanage of kids she's taking care of. Ciel, again, who I hate the fucking lowly thing forever, is having a kind of coming of age story since she's in like her adolescent phase as a demon. And obviously you get a lot of fun with her because Toto's entire quest is to kill the Demon King and become a real hero and make the world a better place. You can see he's got a scar on his face and you don't really know why. That becomes a part of the story later as well. Gore, or Gore, I don't fucking know. Obviously her thing with her whole fetish is dominating people, but he's resistant to her potions and that sort of thing. So her arc becomes more about finding people that actually just like her for who she is and not because they're under her spell or manipulated or dominated. And obviously they don't ever really do anything actually bad, so the characters end up being pretty likable. Toto slowly becomes more functional, and as he starts to figure out more about the girls and kind of who they are, he's pretty accepting. Always a nice basic message in there of accepting people for who they really are and not because they're putting on a front. And it's just a generally fun way to have have your characters sort of have anti-hero motivations or generally negative motivations, but behave in a positive manner, which I think is always a fun dynamic. Trapped in a Dating Sim is one of my favorite series for this. And I would say this show is similar in tone of just being generally pretty lighthearted. It never gets too dark, never gets too serious. And I think it's one where there's just a little bit something for everybody. Anemone is kind of your tsundere, more stereotypical waifu type, I would say. Even her aesthetic is a little bit more Japanese, but she also uses guns as a priestess and smokes and drinks. So you get the fun contradictions there. CL, if you're a filthy loli lover, she's the very gothic Lolita, kind of typical anime thing that everyone thinks makes anyone who watches anime a pervert or a pedo anyway. But if you're into that shit, it's there. And Gore is more of your fan service, maybe Gyaru aesthetic type a little bit, but just kind of the bubbly, fun, big titty anime character. And of course, Toto is your kind of typical awkward with women, but secretly OP character. I do like that he questions it sometimes, but then he's like, oh, the girls must use their magic to buff me. So he's not like completely retarded like a lot of OP characters are, where they're like, oh, I didn't realize I could just kill fucking everything and I'm the best. But if you're into that trope, he's got that going too. And his progression is decent to watch in a sort of Comey can't communicate type way as the story goes on. I'm not going to keep going. I'll just leave it here. Overall, I think it's at least a funny way to do a harem. You get some nice character stuff and some decent moments. Nothing too serious. If you're looking for kind of just a lighthearted, fun show to put on, I think this one's pretty good. If you've seen the show, let me know what you think. Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.